Silence has surrounded me for 4 years now. 4 long years since I stopped hearing my granddaughter's laughter, my son's voice, the birds singing outside my window, and even my own voice. My name is Violet Pryor. I am 67 years old, and my life has been divided into a before and an after, before deafness and after it. It all started with a common cold. At least that's what I thought at first. A fever, a stuffy nose, a headache. Nothing unusual for November Bedford. I didn't think much of it, drank tea with lemon and took an antipyretic. 3 days later, I got worse. My headache got worse. I felt dizzy, and my ears started ringing so badly that I could barely make out the words I was talking to. My son Austin insisted on seeing a doctor. By then, I had been a widow for 2 years. My Edmund had gone suddenly, a heart attack while driving, was coming home after work and didn't make it. We were only 5 years away from our golden wedding anniversary. The doctor diagnosed a severe form of influenza complicated by a bacterial infection. I was hospitalized. The last thing I remember clearly before the world fell into silence was the face of a nurse leaning over me, and her lips saying something I could no longer hear. When I regained consciousness a week later, the world had changed forever. The doctors explained that the antibiotics that had saved my life had turned out to be ototoxic. They had damaged my auditory nerve. It's rare, but it happens. I was unlucky enough to be in that tiny percentage of people who develop such complications. Perhaps your hearing will partially recover with time, Dr. Reeves wrote on a piece of paper when I was still in the hospital. But as time went on, there was no change. I learned to read lips, mastered basic sign language, and adjusted to my new, silent world. The hardest challenge was communicating with my family. Austin and his wife Helena have their own lives, their own problems. Austin works as an insurance claims inspector for a small company, constantly traveling all over the county. Helena is an administrator at a dental clinic, always complaining about problem patients. They've never been particularly patient people, and my deafness has been a real challenge for them. I'd seen Austin sigh irritably when I had to say the same thing over and over again, enunciating the words slowly so I could read their lips. I noticed Helena rolling her eyes, thinking I couldn't see. They were trying, I know, but their patience didn't last long. My only joy is my granddaughter Penny. She's 12, and she's the brightest little person in my life. She spares no time to talk to me, writing notes in neat handwriting, waiting patiently for me to understand what she wants to say. Sometimes I think it's only because of her that I haven't lost my mind in this silent world. I live in my house, a small but cozy 2-story building on the outskirts of Bedford. Edmund and I bought it 30 years ago when prices were still reasonable. Now the neighborhood is considered upscale, and property values have increased several times over. The house is fully paid off, which is rare in these times. After Edmund died, Austin suggested I move in with them. "You shouldn't live alone, Mom," he said. I refused. This house held too many memories for me to leave it. Besides, I didn't want to be a burden to a young family, even though they had a spacious house. When I lost my hearing, the sentence was repeated, but with a different intonation. "You can't live alone like this," Austin said, and his eyes said, "You've become a problem, Mom." I said no again and tried to prove I could handle it. I installed special lights to replace the doorbell and phone, learned to use a tablet to communicate with the outside world, and mastered deaf apps. My hands, thankfully, were still quite nimble after 40 years as an accountant. Austin and Helena visited me on Sundays. The ritual was the same from week to week. They'd arrive around 11 in the morning, bring groceries, Helena would make lunch or heat up something she'd brought, and we'd eat in tense silence, punctuated by occasional attempts at conversation. Penny would show me her drawings or school projects. Then Austin would tour the house, checking for leaks or other problems, and around 3 in the afternoon they would leave, clearly relieved. I saw everything: their strained smiles, the whispers between them when they thought I wasn't looking, the looks they exchanged when I did something wrong or didn't understand them the first time. I read not only lips, but eyes, gestures, all the body language that had become my only way of understanding the world around me. One day I accidentally dropped a cup as Helena was handing me my tea. The porcelain shattered, the tea spilling over the cream-colored carpet in the living room. Helena jumped up, her face contorted with anger. She turned to Austin and said something harsh. I couldn't make out the words, but the expression on her face spoke for itself. Austin put his hand on her shoulder reassuringly and turned to me with a strained smile. It's okay, Mom. It happens. But I knew it wasn't. I had become a burden, a problem, a source of stress and irritation. In January of this year, I read an article in the local paper about an experimental program for treating sensory neural hearing loss at the University Hospital of Bedford. They were looking for volunteers to test a new method combining drug therapy and microsurgery. The chances of success were slim, about 15%, but I had nothing to lose. I didn't tell Austin about my decision. I knew he'd be against it, calling it a waste of time and money. Instead, I contacted the clinic on my own, had a preliminary exam, and was selected for the program. The procedure was scheduled for early February. I told my son that I was going to a week-long computer training program for the hearing impaired. He didn't show much interest in the news, just nodded and wrote on his tablet, "Okay, Mom, call me if you need anything." I smiled, thinking that call was a non-trivial task for me, but I kept silent. The clinic appeared modern and bright. Dr. Elliott, the program director, patiently explained to me all the details of the upcoming procedure, using a clipboard to communicate. He was honest. "Mrs. Pryor, I don't want to give you false hope. The chances of your hearing improving significantly are slim, but even a little progress would be considered a success." The operation was a success, as far as could be judged. Then there were days of recovery, medication drips, daily checkups. I didn't feel any change and was beginning to resign myself to the idea that the experiment had failed. And then a miracle happened. On the 6th day after surgery, I woke up to a sound, a real sound, the muffled humming of the air conditioner in the ward. At first, I thought it was a hallucination or an imagination. But then I heard footsteps in the hallway, the muffled voices of the nurses, the clinking of dishes on the breakfast cart. I cried. For the first time in 4 years, I could hear the world around me. The sounds were muffled, as if coming through a thick blanket, but they were real. Dr. Elliott was as amazed as I was. "This is an amazing result, Mrs. Pryor," he said, and I heard the words addressed to me for the first time in a long time. "We did not expect such a rapid and significant improvement. Perhaps your case was the type of damage that our methodology is particularly effective on." Over the following days, my hearing continued to improve. By the time I was discharged, I could carry on normal conversations, although some frequencies were still inaccessible and I had difficulty distinguishing speech in noisy environments. Standing on the doorstep of the clinic with discharge papers in hand, I thought about how to break the news to Austin and Helena. I imagined their reaction: surprise, joy, relief. No more inconvenience, no more special devices, no more having to repeat each word several times. And then it hit me. What if I didn't tell them? What if I continued to act as if nothing had changed? At least for a while. The thought came suddenly, but the more I thought about it, the more appealing it seemed. In 4 years, I'd learned to read lips and gestures. I could see the tension on their faces when they communicated with me. But what would I hear if they thought I was still deaf? What are they talking about when they're sure I can't hear them? Perhaps this is wrong. Perhaps it's not fair to them. But after so many years in silence, after so many looks they exchanged behind my back, I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know who I really was to them, a beloved mother and grandmother, or a burden that had to be put up with out of a sense of duty. I decided to wait. Not to tell them about the hearing coming back, at least not yet. To see how they acted when they thought I couldn't hear their conversations. The cab brought me home Friday night. I texted Austin to tell him I was back from class, and everything was okay. He replied with a short okay, and added that they would be coming on Sunday as usual. I spent all of Saturday afternoon getting reacquainted with the sounds of my house. The creaking of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the noise of the water pipes, the humming of the refrigerator, all these things filled the space with life, made it three-dimensional, real. I turned on the radio and cried while listening to the music. I turned on the TV and laughed at the jokes on a comedy show. The world of sound came back to me, and it was a true miracle. Sunday morning, I was getting ready for a visit from my son and his family. For the first time in a long time, I would hear their voices, their conversations amongst themselves. Penny's laughter, which for so long I could only imagine. But they can't know about this. Not yet. I rehearsed in front of the mirror how I would behave, how I would still stare intensely into their faces, trying to read the words on their lips, how I would ask them to repeat themselves if I didn't understand, how I would use my tablet to communicate. The doorbell rang, accompanied by the flashing of a special lamp set up for me. I shuddered in surprise. Now I could hear the bell ringing too. Taking a deep breath, I went to open the door, ready to begin my little play and finally learn the truth about what my family thought of me when they thought I couldn't hear what they were saying. They arrived at 11 sharp, punctual as always. I heard the noise of the engine, the slamming of car doors, then voices, their real voices, not distorted by my imagination. "Penny, don't forget to behave yourself at Grandma's," Helena's voice said, with that special intonation one uses when talking to children. "I'm always on my best behavior at Grandma's," replied my granddaughter's sonorous voice. "You're the one who's always frowning, Mom." "Penny!" Austin shushed her. "Don't start." I froze outside the door, absorbing the sound of their voices. My son's voice was lower than I remembered, with a slight huskiness. Helena spoke with that distinct, slightly irritated tone I'd always picked up in her tone. And Penny's voice. Oh my God, she had such a beautiful voice, clear as a spring brook, with that special musicality that only children have. The bell rang and I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the plan. Not to show what I was hearing. To observe, listen, learn the truth. I opened the door with the same tentative smile I'd used for the past 4 years when I couldn't hear who was at the door. "Grandma!" Penny rushed over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist, and I felt my heart clench with love for this child. "Hi, sweetie." I stroked her head, trying to speak the same way I had before. A little louder than I needed to, with slight errors in intonation. "Hi, Mom." Austin waved his hand, knowing I could see the gesture, and added with exaggeratedly clear articulation, "How are you?" "Good," I nodded, gesturing for them to come in. "Come on in." Helena walked past me with a strained smile and bags of groceries in her hands. I noticed the way she rolled her eyes when she thought I couldn't see. Moments like that used to hurt me, but now I was more interested in what she had to say rather than what she had to show. They made their way into the kitchen and I followed, trying to move the way I'd done before, a little unsure, constantly looking around so I wouldn't miss if anyone approached me. "I made chicken from a new recipe," Helena said, defiantly taking the containers out of the bag and turning to face me so I could read her lips. "And the salad." I nodded and smiled, pretending I was having trouble understanding. "Thank you, darling. That's very sweet of you." Penny immediately pulled out her notebook, our usual way of communicating, and quickly wrote, "I got an A on my history project. Would you like to see it?" "Sure, honey." I gave her a genuine smile. "Show me after lunch." Austin, meanwhile, was checking the mail I had stacked on the table. Bills, flyers, a letter from the bank. He always did this, going through my correspondence under the pretense of helping me. It hadn't bothered me before, but now when I saw the look on his face as he read my bank notice, something inside me was alert. We sat down to lunch, and Helena took a seat next to Austin as usual, leaving me and Penny on the other side of the table. This arrangement used to be practical, so I could see their faces when they talked. Now I realized it was also a way to stay away from the problem mother-in-law. "How was your class, Mom?" Austin asked, articulating carefully and looking me straight in the eye. "Good," I nodded. "I learned a lot." "That's good." He nodded and then turned back to Helena, clearly disinterested in my answer. Lunch went on as usual, in tense silence, punctuated by occasional attempts at conversation. I was surprised to find that even when they had been silent before, there were actually brief exchanges of phrases that I couldn't hear, of course. "She looks tired," Helena whispered to Austin when I was busy helping Penny with her salad. "Those courses of hers," Austin muttered. "Why would she do that at her age?" I held back the urge to raise my head and answer. Instead, I continued to help Penny, pretending not to hear their whispering. After lunch, Penny showed me her history project, a colorful presentation on ancient Egypt with cardboard pyramids and little figures of pharaohs. I truly admired her work, and her eyes shone with joy. "Grandma, do you really like it?" she asked, forgetting that I needed to see her lips to understand the question. I pretended not to hear, and she repeated the question, looking me straight in the face. I love it, honey. You're so talented. Austin, meanwhile, was doing his usual tour of the house. I could hear him walking around upstairs, checking for leaks in the bathroom, the condition of the windows, the operation of the heating. Helena stayed downstairs, putting away the dishes after dinner and glancing at her watch, obviously calculating how long she'd have to stay. When Austin came downstairs, he made a sign to Helena and they went out into the backyard. I could see them through the kitchen window. They were standing by the old apple tree that Edmund and I had planted 30 years ago. Austin was smoking, a habit he'd supposedly kicked 5 years ago. Helena was nervously fixing her hair. I walked to the ajar door of the back door, pretending to water the flowers on the windowsill. Their voices came through clearly. I talked to Griffith this week, Austin said, letting out a puff of smoke. The house is worth more than we thought. The neighborhood's become upscale and prices have skyrocketed. How much? Helena asked quickly. About 500,000. Maybe more if we renovate. I froze with the watering can in my hand. They were discussing the value of my house? God, Austin, that would solve all our problems. Helena lowered her voice. The credit for our mortgage, Penny's college tuition. I know. Austin took a drag on his cigarette. But Mom will never agree to sell. She's clinging to this house like it's her last link to Dad. It is, Helena snorted. But it's just a house, not a shrine. And it's too big for one person, especially for a person in her condition. My heart squeezed. I continued to mechanically water the flowers, but every word they said hit like a hammer. I've started gathering information on nursing homes, Austin said. There are some decent options. Sun Valley looks good and is only 20 minutes away. Are you sure we can afford a place like that? Helena frowned. They usually cost a fortune. Mom has a pension and savings, Austin shrugged. Plus, she can sell the house. Enough money for a good nursing home for the rest of her life. The rest of her life? My days. They were discussing putting me in a nursing home and taking my house. Without asking my opinion, not interested in my wishes, just deciding my fate between a cigarette and a cup of coffee. And if she refuses? Helena asked. You know your mother, she's stubborn. She's getting more and more dependent. Austin's voice became harder. Her deafness, her age. Soon she won't be able to live on her own, and we can get guardianship. Then she won't be the one making the decision. The watering can slipped out of my hands and fell to the floor with a clatter. Water spilled over the kitchen tiles. Mom? Austin peeked through the door. Are you okay? I nodded, pretending nothing had happened, and started to pick up the water with a rag. My hands were shaking, but I hoped they'd chalk it up to age and awkwardness. Austin and Helena came back into the house, their faces showing their usual patient irritation. Austin took the rag from me and finished wiping the floor, and Helena sighed defiantly, glancing at her watch. We should go, Mom, Austin said when the water was done. Penny has swimming lessons at 4 o'clock. I nodded, still trying to make sense of the conversation I'd overheard. They wanted to get rid of me, send me to a nursing home, take my house, use my own money to pay for my prison. Penny came over to hug me goodbye and I held her tightly against me, feeling tears come to my eyes. My little girl, the only person in this family who truly loves me. I'll see you next week, Grandma, she said, looking into my eyes. I nodded, not trusting my voice. They were already at the door when Austin turned to Helena and said in a low voice, The house will be ours soon, and we'll put this burden in a nursing home. Something broke inside me. All my plans to pretend, to wait, to gather information. It all crumbled under the weight of those cruel words. A burden. That's what I was to my son. A burden to be rid of. What did you say? My voice came out loud and clear in the silence of the hallway. Austin froze, his hand on the doorknob frozen. Helena turned around abruptly, her eyes widening with shock. Mom? Austin turned around slowly. Did you hear that? Every word. I looked straight at him, not trying to hide my anger or my pain. Every fucking word, Austin. They turned pale. Both of them. Their faces were whiter than chalk. Their eyes widened with horror and shame. But how? Helena mumbled, her voice shaking. The experimental treatment, I stepped forward. It worked. I've been hearing for a week now, and today I'd heard enough. Penny shifted her gaze from me to her parents, her face a look of confusion and worry. Grandma, what's going on? Nothing, honey. I tried to soften my voice to her. Just adult conversation. Why don't you wait in the car? Austin jerked his chin, and Penny gave me another concerned look and walked out the door. Mom, listen. Austin held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. You misunderstood. We're just concerned about you, about your well-being. Don't lie to me. I felt the anger rising in me in a hot wave. Don't you dare lie to my face after what I heard. The house will be ours soon, and we'll put this burden in a nursing home. Those are your words, Austin. Yours! Helena grabbed her husband's arm, her eyes darting between us. Violet, we should have discussed this with you, of course, but you have to realize that at my age, people deserve respect from their children. I cut her off. At my age, people have the right to decide where and how they want to live. And at my age, people usually know who really loves them and who's just waiting for an inheritance. Helena's face contorted with anger, but Austin squeezed her hand, silencing her. Mom. His voice became softer, almost pleading. Yes, I said some terrible things. I was upset. Helena and I are going through financial difficulties, and I snapped. But you know I love you. You're my mother. Love doesn't look like that, Austin. I shook my head. Love doesn't plan to get rid of a person like they're an unwanted thing. Love doesn't call a person a burden. There was a heavy silence in the room. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, water dripping from a faucet somewhere in the back of the house, cars driving down the street. The sounds I had been unable to hear for so long were now all around me, emphasizing the tension of the moment. What are you going to do? Austin finally asked. There was anxiety in his voice, but not for me. For himself, for his plans, which were now in jeopardy. I could kick them out now. I could have screamed, cried, blamed them. But looking at their frightened, guilty faces, I suddenly realized I didn't want to waste my energy on that. They weren't worth my tears or my anger. They didn't even deserve my hatred. Right now, I want you to leave, I said calmly. I need to think. Mom, Austin started, but I held up my hand to stop him. Go away, please. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Helena tugged on Austin's sleeve, and he nodded reluctantly. We'll call you, he said, opening the door. Don't bother, I replied. I'll contact you myself when I'm ready. They walked out, and I closed the door behind them. Through the window, I watched them walk to the car, Austin with his head down, Helena whispering something fiercely in his ear. Penny sat in the back seat, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes worried and sad. I waved at her, and she waved back, smiling weakly. As their car disappeared around the corner, I slowly sank into the living room chair. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and my throat was lumpy. I felt betrayed and devastated. But underneath those emotions, something else was slowly building. Determination. They wanted to get rid of me, to use my condition against me, take my house, my money, my independence. But now, I had an advantage. I knew their plans, and they didn't know what I was going to do next. I wouldn't make a scene. I'm not going to yell and blame. I would approach this strategically. They wanted to play me? Well, the game was just beginning. And this time, I was going to make the rules. I spent the evening after they left trying to calm down. I made myself some peppermint tea, an old remedy my mother had taught me, and sat in a chair by the window, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the rooftops of the neighboring houses. Shock and pain slowly gave way to cold determination. I wasn't going to let them run my life. But to protect myself, I needed information. Full information about what they were planning, how far they had gone, and what options I had to confront them. The next morning, I sprang into action. The first thing I decided to do was check my cell phone. For the past 4 years, while I'd been deaf, Austin had insisted on hooking it up to his family plan. It's easier to keep track of bills that way, Mom, he'd said then. I realize now that it was just another way to control me. I pulled out my phone and scrutinized it. Just a normal smartphone, set to maximum volume and with apps installed for the hearing impaired. But what else was on there? I looked through all the apps and found something interesting. A remote access program installed in the utilities folder. A program that allowed Austin to see what I was doing on my phone and even access it when I wasn't using it. I didn't bother deleting it. Not yet. Instead, I decided to use Edmund's old phone that was stored in my dresser drawer. I charged it, inserted the new SIM card I'd bought on the way back from the clinic, and now I had a way to communicate that Austin didn't know about. The second step was to check my computer. Like the phone, my laptop was set up by Austin. "For your convenience, Mom," he said as he installed programs and adjusted settings. I'd always been a pretty good user. My job as an accountant required it, but after my hearing loss, I'd come to trust my abilities less and let my son take over everything tech-related. Now I turned on the computer with renewed suspicion, and for good reason. A quick search revealed that a remote access program was also installed on it. What's more, all my passwords for bank accounts and email were stored in a password manager that Austin must have had access to. I didn't bother changing anything on that computer. Instead, I pulled Edmund's old laptop out of the pantry, reset it completely, and started using it for my research, creating new email accounts and changing all the passwords to new ones that Austin would never guess. The next step was to research finances. I had always been careful with money, and Edmund and I had saved a decent amount over the years. Pension, savings, investments, I had enough to live comfortably without worrying about tomorrow, but now I began to doubt whether my money was secure. I went to the bank the next day. The manager, Mr. Collins, was surprised to see me unaccompanied. "Mrs. Pryor, what a pleasant surprise," he said when I entered his office. "Usually your son accompanies you. Today, I decided to come myself," I replied with a smile. "I need full information about the state of my accounts, Mr. Collins." He looked a little puzzled, but I thought, "Isn't your son—" "My hearing is restored," I interrupted him. "Experimental treatment. Now I can manage my finances on my own." It took over an hour to go through the bank statements. What I discovered made me cold. Over the past 2 years, Austin had made regular transfers from my savings account to a joint account I didn't even remember opening. Small amounts, $500 to $2,000 a month, that added up to an impressive figure. Almost $30,000 over 2 years. "I didn't authorize those transfers," I told Mr. Collins, pointing to the statements. He frowned. "But we have a power of attorney signed by you, Mrs. Pryor. It gives your son full access to your accounts." I asked to see that power of attorney. It was dated last year, and it did have my signature on it, except I didn't remember signing it. "I'll have to think about it," I said. "In the meantime, I'd like to suspend my son's access to my accounts and withdraw some cash." Mr. Collins looked uncertain, but finally agreed. I revoked the power of attorney, changed my online banking passwords, and withdrew $10,000 in cash, an amount sufficient to live on for a while if something went wrong. Back home, I started looking for any documents Austin might have left at my house. He sometimes worked in the small upstairs office that used to belong to Edmund. "Checking your accounts, Mom," he'd say, spending hours there at my computer. In a desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Mom's Options. Inside were brochures and printouts about various nursing homes within a 30-mile radius of Bedford. Some pages were marked with notes in the margins. Sun Valley was circled in red marker with the caption, "Best bet is to check the cost." I continued my search, and in another drawer I found an even more disturbing document, a partially completed application for a declaration of incapacity. The form required a doctor's signature and testimony about my mental state. Most of it was already filled out in Austin's handwriting. Patient exhibits signs of age-related dementia exacerbated by deafness. Incapable of making sound financial decisions. Requires constant supervision. Lies. It was all a lie. I felt nausea coming up my throat. My own son was preparing documents to take away my right to control my life. I made copies of all the documents I found and hid them in a safe place, an old cookbook where Austin would never look. I spent the next few days regaining control of my life. I changed passwords to all online services, created new email accounts, updated my will, and met with a new lawyer who was not related to my son. Austin called every day, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to him without gathering all the facts. Instead, I listened to his messages on my answering machine. "Mom, Please pick up the phone. We need to talk. I know you're upset, but it's not what it looks like. Then, Mom, I'm worried about you. If you don't answer, I'll come over. We need to discuss your condition and what to do next. And finally, Mom, I spoke to Dr. Harris. He thinks your reaction may be a sign of a perceptual problem. It's common when hearing returns after a long absence. Please let us help you. Each message only strengthened my resolve. They didn't just want to send me to a nursing home. They were willing to declare me mentally unstable to get their way. On Thursday, my new phone rang. The one Austin didn't know about. The number was unfamiliar. Grandma? I heard Penny's voice when I answered. It's me. Penny? Honey, how did you find this number? I was surprised. I saw it on a piece of paper on your desk when I was at your place on Sunday, she said. I wrote it down just in case. Grandma, can you really hear again? Yes, dear, I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. I can hear. It's so great. Her voice sounded excited. But Dad and Mom are acting weird. They keep whispering and stop talking when I come into the room. And Dad said that you might have a problem with your head. Is that true? No, honey, I said firmly. There's nothing wrong with my head. It's just that your daddy and I had a misunderstanding. I knew it, she sounded relieved. Can I come to you, please? I thought about it. On the one hand, I didn't want to drag Penny into the conflict between me and her parents. On the other, she was my one true ally in the family. Do your parents know you're calling me? No, she admitted. I'm calling from a friend's cell phone, but I can tell them I'm going to Lizzie's, and I'll take the bus to your place. I know the route. Penny, I don't want you to lie to your parents, but I really want to see you, Grandma. She stopped talking. I heard them talking about selling your house. Is that true? My heart sank. Even Penny sensed something was wrong. Listen, honey, let's do this. I'll call your mom and tell her I'd like to spend time with you on Saturday. Honestly and openly. What do you say? Okay, she agreed after a pause. But will you really call? Promise? I promise. After talking to Penny, I pulled myself together and called Helena. The conversation was tense. Violet, she sounded wary. We were worried about you. I'm fine, I said dryly. I want to spend the day with Penny on Saturday, just her. I don't think that's a good idea, Helena began. After what happened? After you and Austin planned to put me in a nursing home without my consent, I interrupted her. Or after my son called me a burden. Helena sighed. Violet, you've got it all wrong. We were just looking at options. I want to spend the day with my granddaughter, I said firmly. That's out of the question. If you say no, I'll call Austin and tell him what I know about the transfers from my account over the last 2 years. I'm sure his insurance company would be interested to know how their employee had been secretly withdrawing money from his elderly mother's account. There was silence on the other end of the line. You wouldn't dare, Helena finally said. Try to stop me from seeing Penny, and you'll see what I'm capable of. After a moment, Helena gave in. Okay, I'll bring her in at 10 o'clock Saturday morning and pick her up at 6 o'clock at night. Thank you. I tried to keep my voice calm. And Helena, don't try to track what we're doing. No spy apps on her phone, no surprises. I'll check it out. I hung up, feeling a mixture of guilt and determination. I'd never threatened my family before, but they'd left me no choice. On Saturday, Helena dropped Penny off at 10 sharp. My granddaughter jumped out of the car as soon as it stopped and rushed to hug me. Grandma! Her face brightened. Can you really hear me? Yes, sweetheart, I smiled, looking into her bright eyes. Every word. Helena didn't get out of the car, just waved and drove off, obviously not wanting another confrontation. Penny and I had a lovely afternoon. I made her favorite blueberry pancakes for breakfast, and we were finally able to have a real conversation, not through notes or painful lip reading, but normally, like grandmother and granddaughter. I listened to her stories about school, about friends, about how she won the drawing contest last month. I wanted to tell you, but it was hard to explain in a note, she said, showing me pictures of her artwork on her phone. Now you can tell me everything, I hugged her, and I will hear every word. After lunch, we went to the park. It was a warm spring day. The trees were covered with tender green, and the air smelled fresh and revitalized. We sat on a bench watching the children play on the playground and ate ice cream. Grandma, Penny said suddenly, looking at her rapidly melting ice cream. What's going on between you and Daddy? I sighed. I didn't want to lie to her, but I couldn't tell her the whole truth. Your dad and I disagree on some things about my future, I said carefully. He thinks he knows what's best for me, and I think I can decide for myself. Penny licked her spoon thoughtfully. Is this about the house? I heard them talking about it. Dad said you can't live in it alone, that it's dangerous. What do you think? I asked. Do I look incapable of living on my own? She looked at me carefully. None too, you look as normal as ever. Even better now that you can hear. Exactly, I nodded. I lived on my own for 4 years being deaf, and I managed. Now that I can hear, it's only going to get easier. Then why is Daddy so worried? I paused, searching for words. Sometimes adults confuse caring with control, honey. Your dad thinks he cares about me, but really he's trying to control my life. Penny nodded with sudden understanding. Like when he wouldn't let me go to a concert with Lizzie because he was concerned for my safety, even though Lizzie's mom promised to be with us the whole time? Very likely, I smiled, marveling at her insight. What are you going to do? Protect myself and my rights, I said firmly. But I'd hate to put you between me and your parents, Penny. You don't get to choose sides in this conflict. I already have, she pressed herself against me. I'm on your side, Grandma. My heart filled with warmth, but anxiety too. I didn't want to turn Penny against her parents, whatever they were. Honey, your parents love you, and you should respect them. But if you ever notice anything strange or hear anything important, you can tell me. We'll keep in touch through your secret phone. She nodded, her eyes shining with the importance of our secret pact. I'll be your ears and eyes, Grandma. That evening, after Helena took Penny away, I continued my investigation. I now had my granddaughter as an ally, though I felt a prick of conscience for dragging a child into our adult conflict. But I consoled myself that I wasn't asking her to spy just to be attentive. The next day, Penny called. Grandma, Daddy just got off the phone with some Mr. Griffith about your house. They were discussing market appraisal and potential buyers. Daddy said he wanted to act quickly while you... She stopped talking. Before you change your mind. Thank you, honey. I tried to keep my voice calm, even though I was seething with anger. You've been really helpful. He also said he's meeting with some Dr. Reeves on Tuesday. Something about your case. Dr. Reeves was my old doctor who treated me when I lost my hearing. Apparently, Austin planned to get the medical opinion necessary to declare me incompetent. Grandma, I'm scared. Penny's voice shook. Do they really want to sell your house? Don't worry, honey. I tried to keep my voice steady. They can't do it without my consent, and I'm not going to give it. After talking to Penny, I sat down and wrote down everything I'd learned in the last few days. The facts were irrefutable. Austin and Helena were planning to put me in a nursing home against my will, sell my house, and use the money to solve their financial problems. They had already taken steps to implement this plan, from secretly withdrawing money from my accounts to preparing papers to declare me incapacitated. I couldn't let that happen, but simply refusing wasn't enough. They could try to proceed through the courts, especially if they got a report from Dr. Reeves. I needed a plan, a strategy that would not only protect me, but also deny them the opportunity to try again in the future. I opened my new notebook and started writing. A plan of action, a list of people to contact, documents to prepare. I worked late into the night, and when I was done, I had a clear idea of what to do next. The first item on my list was to meet with Evelyn Bishop, an old friend of mine who used to work as a lawyer. We hadn't seen each other in years, since I'd lost my hearing and started avoiding social contact. But if anyone could help me understand the legal aspects of my situation, it was Evelyn. I went to bed with a heavy heart, but with a firm resolve. Tomorrow, I would take action. And Austin and Helena would learn that I couldn't be treated like this. I wasn't a helpless old woman to be put in a nursing home and forgotten. I was Violet Pryor, and I was going to fight for my life, my home, and my dignity. Evelyn Bishop lived in a small house on the east side of Bedford, in a quiet neighborhood lined with neat cottages with well-kept gardens. I hadn't been here in almost 5 years, not since I'd lost my hearing. It wasn't that Evelyn and I had quarreled. It was just that communication had become too difficult, and I was too proud to keep asking for repetition or writing things down on paper. The cab dropped me off at her house on Tuesday morning. I knew that was the time Austin was supposed to be meeting with Dr. Reeves, so the risk of being seen was minimal. I'd called Evelyn the day before, and when she heard my voice, she didn't believe it at first. Violet? Is that really you? You're talking. And I hear you, Evie. I smiled into the phone. It's a long story. I need your help. She agreed without hesitation, and now I stood in front of her door, a little nervous. It had been so long since we'd seen each other. The door opened almost immediately after the bell rang. Evelyn looked almost exactly as I remembered her, tall, slender, with short gray hair and shrewd gray eyes. Maybe a few more wrinkles, but the same clear eyes and straight posture. Violet! She opened her arms and I stepped into them, tears welling up in my eyes. Evie, I've missed you so much. Come in, come in, come in. I have so many questions. We settled into her cozy living room, and I told her all about my deafness, about the experimental treatment, about getting my hearing back, and about what I'd learned about Austin and Helena's plans. Evelyn listened without interrupting, only occasionally raising her eyebrows in surprise or shifting in indignation. Oh my God, Vi, she said when I was done. It's, it's horrible. How could your own son do such a thing? Money changes people, I shrugged, trying to speak calmly, though I was still seething with resentment and anger inside. My house was worth about $500,000 now. For Austin and Helena, it was the solution to all their financial problems. But trying to declare you incompetent? Evelyn shook her head. That's a crime, Vi. That's why I'm here. I leaned forward. I need your advice. What can I do to protect myself? What are my legal options? Evelyn pondered, tapping her fingers on the arm of the chair. It was a signature gesture I remembered from the days when she practiced it. First, you need a new will, she said firmly. Immediately. If you have documentation that Austin withdrew money from your accounts without your knowledge, we can use that as leverage. I have bank statements. Oh, good. Now about the house. She tapped her fingers faster. You could set up a trust to protect your property. Or at the very least, sell it yourself, but on your own terms. The thought of selling the house where Edmund and I had lived for 30 years was painful. But if it was the only way to keep Austin and Helena from getting it, what about their attempts to have me declared incompetent? That's the hard part, Evelyn admitted. But we have the advantage that you can hear now, and that makes a big difference. You need an independent medical report that proves you're legally competent, and the sooner the better. I can get in touch with Dr. Elliott at University Hospital. I nodded. He ran the program that gave me my hearing back. He'd be happy to help. Perfect, Evelyn smiled. Now we need a lawyer. I've been retired for 5 years, but my former colleague Lorraine Paxton is still practicing. She specializes in just such cases, protecting the rights of the elderly from unscrupulous relatives. Sounds like exactly what I need. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. Evie, I can't believe it's come to this, that I have to defend myself against my own son. Evelyn took my hand. Listen, Vi, what Austin and Helena did is unforgivable, but you're strong. You've always been strong. And you're not alone now. We spent the next 3 hours working out a plan of action. Evelyn called her old colleagues, made appointments, explained the situation. I contacted Dr. Elliott and he agreed to do a full evaluation and give me a mental status report. And now the most important thing, Evelyn said when we were done with the calls. You need to be very careful how you talk to Austin and Helena. They mustn't realize that you're preparing for a confrontation. Let them think they have everything under control until we have the paperwork ready. Pretend to be a helpless old lady? I snorted. I'm not sure I can do that. Not helpless. Evelyn shook her head. Just not suspicious. Act like you're still trying to make sense of the situation. Don't show that you have a plan. And most importantly, don't let them make you sign anything. I nodded, understanding the logic behind her advice. I couldn't scare Austin and Helena away before they did. The next day, I met with Lorraine Paxton, a friend of Evelyn's, at her office in downtown Bedford. She turned out to be an energetic woman of about 60 with a keen eye and determined manners. Mrs. Pryor, what your son is doing is called financial abuse of the elderly, she said as she looked over the bank statements and documents I'd brought. And trying to manipulate medical reports to get custody is a felony. I don't want to sue him, I said hastily. He is my son, after all. I understand, Lorraine nodded. But we need to create a legal defense that will prevent him from trying again. The first step would be a new will and power of attorney for medical decisions, where Austin wouldn't figure. We spent 2 hours drafting the new documents. Under the new will, my house and most of my savings were to go into a trust administered by an independent trustee upon my death, with the stipulation that the proceeds be used for Penny's education. Austin and Helena would get nothing. That's harsh, Lorraine observed, but fair given their actions. I've also signed a new medical power of attorney, appointing Evelyn as the decision-maker in the event of my incapacity. Lastly, I set up an irrevocable trust into which I transferred the house and most of my assets, with the stipulation that I remain a beneficiary for the rest of my life. Now your son won't be able to get control of your estate, even if by some miracle you are declared incompetent, Lorraine explained. After the meeting with the lawyer, I went to the bank and withdrew another $30,000 from my accounts. Enough to live for a while independent of the banking system if Austin tried to freeze my accounts. I also opened a new safe deposit box in a different name, my mother's maiden name, and kept copies of all important documents and some cash there. By Thursday evening, I felt much more confident. I had a plan, I had allies, and I had taken concrete steps to protect myself and my assets. But one problem remained unresolved: Penny. I didn't want her to suffer because of the conflict between me and her parents. She was an innocent child caught between two fires. Friday morning, the doorbell rang. I tensed up. I wasn't expecting visitors. Cautiously walking to the door, I looked through the peephole and saw Austin and Helena standing on the porch with strained smiles and a bouquet of flowers. I took a deep breath, remembering Evelyn's advice. Don't show you have a plan. Then I opened the door. Mom! Austin stepped forward with open arms. We were so worried. I let him hug me, even though every cell in my body was protesting this fake show of concern. Come in, I said in a neutral tone. They walked into the living room and Helena handed me a bouquet of pink carnations, my favorite flowers, or rather Edmund's favorite flowers, who always gave them to me. I doubted Helena knew that. Thank you. I took the bouquet and went to the kitchen to get a vase, leaving them alone for a moment. Smiling, that's a good sign, I heard Helena whisper to me. Take your time, Austin replied. Let's see what kind of mood she's in first. I returned with the flowers in a vase and set them on the coffee table. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? I asked, sitting down in the chair. Austin and Helena exchanged quick glances. We just wanted to make sure you were all right, Mom, Austin said with the kind of tone one uses when talking to small children or the very elderly. You weren't answering your cell phone and we were worried. I've been busy, I answered vaguely. A lot of things had piled up during my years of deafness. Oh, of course, Helena nodded with exaggerated understanding. So much must have changed for you. Indeed, I allowed myself a slight smile. The world of sound is an amazing place. Mom, Austin leaned forward, his face serious. We need to talk about what happened on Sunday. I know you were upset and you had a right to be. What you heard. I'm not proud of it. But you have to understand Helena and I really care about you. We do? I raised an eyebrow. Of course we do, Helena exclaimed. You live alone in a big house, and even with your hearing back, well, you're not getting any younger, Violet. None of us are, dear. I smiled at her with a slight irony. Not even you. Helena blushed slightly. She had recently turned 40, and she was sensitive to any mention of age. We just want you to be safe, Austin continued. And yes, we've discussed nursing home options, but only as one possibility. There's medical staff, companionship, activities. And it costs a fortune, I pointed out. Money's not a problem, Mom. Austin waved his hand. You've got savings, a pension, and a house, I added, watching his reaction. Austin tensed slightly, but quickly regained control. Yes, and a house, which frankly is too big for one person and requires constant upkeep. Hmm. I pretended to think about it. You might be right. I was actually thinking about selling it. Austin's eyes lit up and he quickly glanced over to Helena. Really? It's it's a smart decision, Mom. I could help with the sale. I know a realtor. Mr. Griffith? I asked innocently. Austin froze for a moment. Yes, Griffith. Where did you? You mentioned him before. I shrugged. Now that I'm hearing things, I'm remembering a lot of things. Helena hurried to change the subject. Violet, Austin, and I were thinking, maybe you'd like to stay with us for a while, just to get used to the new hearing situation. Penny would be so happy. That was unexpected. I had assumed they would insist on a nursing home, not offer to move in with them. Obviously, they were changing tactics. That's very nice of you, I smiled. But I'm used to being on my own. And frankly, I like to hear the sounds of my home again. Of course we understand, Austin said quickly. Just keep in mind that the offer is open. For the next half hour, they showered me with acts of concern, asking if I needed help around the house, if I wanted them to take me shopping, if I needed new appliances now that I could use a regular phone and TV. I answered evasively, not agreeing but not saying no directly either. Let them think that I was still indecisive, that I was vulnerable and susceptible to their influence. By the way, Mom, Austin said casually before he left, I met with Dr. Reeves. He'd really like to check you out, see how your hearing is progressing. Maybe next Tuesday? That's it. They were still planning on getting the medical opinion they needed to declare me incompetent. Tuesday? I pretended to try to remember my plans. No, I can't Tuesday. I have a meeting with the bank. Maybe later. With the bank? Austin frowned. Why? Oh, just routine matters. I waved my hand. Now that I can hear again, I want to get my finances in order. Austin looked worried. I could come with you, help. No need, honey. I smiled. I'll be fine. After all, I'd been an accountant for 40 years. Money is something I'm good at. When they finally left, I exhaled a sigh of relief and sank into my chair. It had been a stressful visit, but I think I had done well. They left confident that I was still vulnerable and manipulative, but at the same time quite concerned about my references to the bank and selling the house on my own. An hour after they left, I got a call from Penny. Grandma, they came back from your place and Daddy looks strange, she said in a whisper. She and Mom closed themselves in the kitchen and argued for a long time. Daddy said something about, she's up to something, and we need to act fast. Don't worry, honey. I tried to keep my voice calm. Everything's under control. I'm scared, Grandma. What do they want to do? They want me to sell the house and move into a nursing home. I decided to be honest with her, even though I didn't give her all the details. But I'm not going to do that. I don't want you to leave, Penny's voice shook. I want you to always be there for me. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Listen, honey, I need you to be very careful. Don't tell your parents you're calling me and don't say anything about our conversations. It's important. I understand, she said seriously. I'll be careful. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. After talking to Penny, I called Evelyn and told her about Austin and Helena's visit. They're changing tactics, she said thoughtfully. Instead of direct pressure, they're trying to work through concern and false benevolence. It's trickier, but in a way it's easier to resist. You know their true intentions. But they're still planning to get a medical opinion from Dr. Reeves, I reminded her. Austin was trying to set up a meeting for next week. Then we have to get ahead of them, Evelyn said firmly. Tomorrow you're going to see Dr. Elliott for an evaluation, and we'll get an independent opinion on your mental state. Then Lorraine will send a formal letter to Dr. Reeves warning him of his responsibility for providing false medical reports. You think that's going to stop him? Most doctors are very careful when it comes to legal threats, Evelyn said confidently. And if you already have an opinion from a renowned specialist at a university hospital, contradicting it would be a reputational risk. We went on with the plan. I would have a full examination with Dr. Elliott, complete the legal procedures with Lorraine, and then we planned the decisive step, a direct confrontation with Austin and Helena, but from a position of strength, not vulnerability. They think you're a weak old woman who can be manipulated, Evelyn said at the end of the conversation. It's time to show them how wrong they are. On Saturday, I had a checkup with Dr. Elliot. He was outraged to hear about my son's plans. Mrs. Pryor, you are in excellent mental health, he assured me after a series of tests. I'd be happy to provide an official report confirming that, and if necessary, I'd be willing to testify in court. I hope it doesn't come to that, Dr. Elliot, I sighed. But thank you. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and some paper. I started writing a list what I wanted to say to Austin when the time came. How to explain to him that he had betrayed me, that he had ruined our family with his greed. How to describe the pain of realizing that your own child thinks you're a burden to be rid of. The words just wouldn't come. How to express such fundamental pain, such deep disappointment. I put my pen aside and looked out the window, at the yard where Austin had once played as a child, where he'd built his first birdhouse with Edmund's help, where we celebrated his graduation from college, proud parents with an only son. What happened to that boy? When did he turn into a man capable of sending his own mother to a nursing home for money? On Sunday, I began to prepare for the crucial conversation. I reread all the documents Lorraine had prepared, checked that all the copies were safely stored in the safety deposit box. I gathered all the evidence of Austin's financial fraud account statements, copies of powers of attorney with my supposedly forged signature. Evelyn called this afternoon. Everything's ready, Vi, she said. Lorraine sent the letter to Dr. Reeves. The trust has been registered. The new will has been drawn up. The medical report from Dr. Elliot is in hand. Are you ready? Ready, I sighed. I'm sorry it had to come to this, though. I know, sweetheart. But you're protecting yourself. And you're protecting Penny so that she can have the future her parents seem ready to squander. You're right, I straightened up. I'll do it. We agreed that I would invite Austin and Helena over for dinner Tuesday night. To talk things over, as I say. They'll come, of course, expecting me to finally agree to their plans. But instead, they're in for a very different conversation. I called Austin on Sunday night. Mom? He answered after the first beep, as if he'd been waiting for me to call. How are you? Good, Austin. I tried to keep my voice soft. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about my future. I think we need to talk about it calmly. Why don't you and Helena come to my house for dinner on Tuesday? No Penny, just the adults. Of course, Mom, he said with a poorly concealed satisfaction in his voice. We'll be there. 6 o'clock? 6 would be great, I smiled, knowing he couldn't see my expression. See you later, honey. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. The plan was in motion. In 2 days, I would confront my son and his wife, armed not only with the truth but with a legal defense they never expected. It would not be easy, it would be painful, but it would be necessary. Tuesday came too quickly, and at the same time, unbearably slow. I spent all of Monday preparing for the meeting, both practically and emotionally. Lorraine sent the final versions of all the documents. Evelyn helped me prepare a speech, and I prepared my own dinner. Simple, but elegant. Rosemary chicken, baked potatoes, fresh salad. Nothing fancy, but enough to create the illusion of a casual family dinner. The illusion is what our family had become, a facade that hid greed, lies, and betrayal. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The table was set, papers laid out in my bedroom, ready to be presented at a moment's notice. I wore my best dress, a navy blue dress with a pearl necklace Edmund had given me for our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look strong and collected, not like the helpless old woman they were used to seeing. The doorbell rang at 6 sharp. Punctuality had always been Austin's strong suit, one of the few things I could still respect about him. Mom, he smiled as he entered the house. You look wonderful. Thank you, darling. I let him kiss my cheek, though my insides clenched at the falseness of the gesture. Helena came in next, with a strained smile and a bottle of wine in her hands. Violet, I brought your favorite Chardonnay. My favorite was Pinot Noir, but I didn't bother to correct her. What did it matter now? How nice. I accepted the bottle. Come on into the dining room, everything's ready. They exchanged quick glances, surprised, almost alarmed. Perhaps they expected to see me depressed, uncertain, ready to agree to their terms. Instead, there stood before them a well-dressed, confident woman who seemed to be in complete control of the situation. We sat down at the table and I laid out the food. The conversation started with the usual topics: the weather, the news, Austin's job. They were tense. I could feel it. They were waiting for me to talk about selling the house, about moving into a nursing home. But I was in no hurry. "How's Penny?" I asked as I put the salad on. "Is she okay?" "Oh, yeah." Helena nodded a little too vigorously. "She's at a friend's tonight. Really wanted to go, some kind of science project." I knew that was a lie. Penny told me she'd been sent to her grandparents on Helena's side so she wouldn't get in the way of adult conversation. "Tell her I miss her," I smiled. "Of course." Austin cleared his throat. "Mom, you said you wanted to discuss something important?" This was it, the moment I've been preparing for. "Yes." I set aside my fork and napkin. "I've made a decision about my future." They stepped forward, their eyes alight with anticipation. "I'm selling the house," I said calmly. Helena couldn't hold back a victorious smile, and Austin tried to look worried, though I could see the relief in his eyes. "Mom, this is a big decision." He frowned for the sake of appearances. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I nodded. "This house holds too many memories. It's time to move on." "We can help you with the sale," Helena said quickly. "Austin has already spoken to Griffith, and he thinks the house could sell very favorably." "Oh, that won't be necessary," I smiled. "I've already found a buyer." Their faces stretched in surprise. "A buyer?" Austin almost choked on his wine. "Who?" "A young family, Noah and Yvonne Shepherd. They have 2 kids, and they've been looking for a house in the neighborhood for a while. They offered a good price." "But, how?" Helena looked shocked. "When did you have time?" "Last Friday." I shrugged. "They're moving out of Portland and they needed a quick decision. We signed the preliminary contract yesterday." Austin turned pale. "Mom, you can't make decisions like that without consulting me. This house, it's part of our family history." "Our family history?" I raised an eyebrow. "The same history you were going to sell to put me in a nursing home?" There was a heavy silence. Austin and Helena exchanged panicked glances. "Mom, you've got it wrong." "No, Austin," I interrupted him. "I got it right. I heard you call me a liability. I saw the papers you hid in your office. The declaration of incapacity. The nursing home brochures with your notes on them. I've gotten bank statements showing how you've been withdrawing money from my accounts for the last 2 years." His face turned ash gray. Helena looked like she was going to throw up. "It's not what you think," Austin began. "Really?" I got up and left the room. I came back a minute later with a folder of papers. "Then explain this to me." I spread the papers out on the table, copies of bank statements, a power of attorney with my forged signature, a partially filled out declaration of incapacity. "You were planning to get rid of me." My voice sounded surprisingly calm. "Send me to a nursing home, sell my house, take my money. My deafness was a gift to you. You could say anything in my presence, plan my life without worrying that I would hear." "That's not true," Helena exclaimed. "We wanted the best for you." "The best?" I grinned. "The house will be ours soon, and we'll put this burden in a nursing home." "Is that how caring sounds?" Austin lowered his head. "I said it in a fit of anger. I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly that," I said firmly. "And you know what? I'm actually grateful for your honesty. You showed me who I really am to you. Not a mother, not a person to be respected, but a possession to be disposed of as you see fit." "Mom, please." "No, Austin," I held up my hand, stopping him. "I'm not finished. I'm selling the house, that's true. But the money from the sale isn't going to the nursing home or your financial problems." "What are you going to do?" he asked. And for the first time, there was real fear in his voice. "I'm moving to Portland," I said. "Evelyn Bishop, remember her? She's an old friend of mine. She was widowed last year and offered to let me live with her. She has a big house and we get along great, so I'm starting a new life." "You can't just leave," Helena exclaimed. "What about Penny? She'll miss you." "Penny can come visit me on vacation," I smiled. "If you let her, of course. I've already talked to her about it, and she's thrilled at the idea of spending the summer in Portland." "You've talked to her?" Austin frowned. "When?" "Penny and I have a lot of secrets," I winked. "She's a very observant girl. Noticed how strange you've been acting lately." Helena paled even more. "What did you tell her?" Just that there was a misunderstanding between us. I shrugged. I didn't tell her that her father called me a burden and planned to get rid of me. She loves you too much, Austin, to know that truth. Austin looked like he'd been kicked in the butt. Mom, I don't know what to say. Then listen, I sat down again and folded my hands on the table. I've changed my will. You and Helena are no longer my heirs. Instead, I've set up a trust for Penny. She'll have access to the money when she turns 25. The rest will go to a charity for elderly victims of financial abuse by relatives. Ironic, isn't it? You can't disinherit us? Helena was outraged. It's not fair. Is it fair to send your mother-in-law to a nursing home against her will to take possession of her house? I looked her straight in the eye. Is it fair to steal money from an elderly woman's accounts? Is it fair to forge her signature on documents? Helena looked away, her face flushed with shame or anger. I couldn't say for sure. We can contest the will, Austin said quietly. Prove that you're incapacitated. You can try. I smiled and pulled another document out of the folder. But here's a medical report from Dr. Elliott at the University Hospital, confirming that I'm fully competent. And here's a letter from my attorney, Lorraine Paxton, to Dr. Reeves, warning him of his liability for providing false medical reports. I don't think he'd want to risk his license for you, Austin. My son looked at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. You've thought this through. Of course, I nodded. I might have lost my hearing, but not my brain. And speaking of the money you took from my accounts, $30,000 is a lot of money. I could sue you, but I won't. Consider this your last gift from me. But the power of attorney has been revoked, and all my accounts are now protected. There was silence. Austin and Helena sat stunned, unable to believe that their plans had fallen apart so suddenly and completely. When are you leaving? Austin finally asked. Next Monday, I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. The buyers will be moving in a month, but I won't wait. Evelyn's already preparing a room for me. What about your stuff? Helena looked around, as if only now realizing that the whole house was full of furniture and personal belongings. I only take the essentials and personal memorabilia, I shrugged. The rest is already included in the price of the house. The Shepherds are a young family, and they could use some nice furniture. That's it? Austin stood up, his face contorted with anger and pain. You're just going to leave and cut us out of your life? I looked at my son, the only child I'd given birth to, raised, loved with all my heart. The man who had betrayed me so deeply that the wound would never fully heal. You crossed me out first, Austin, I said quietly. The moment you decided I was a burden, not a person, the moment you started planning my life without my consent, like I was a thing and not your mother. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. I'm really sorry, Mom. I know. I nodded. But you're sorry not for what you were planning to do, but for getting caught. And those are different things, Austin. Helena stood up, gathering her bag. Come on, Austin. There's nothing more to say here. He hesitated as if he wanted to say something else, but then nodded and followed his wife to the door. I walked them out, standing straight with my head held high. Can I at least say goodbye before you leave? Austin asked at the threshold. I'll be busy packing, I replied. But I'll call Penny and say goodbye to her. And like I said, she can come visit me for the vacations. I won't prevent that, he said quietly. I promise. That's something, I smiled weakly. Goodbye, Austin. Goodbye, Mom. He looked at me with such sadness that for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When the door closed behind them, I walked back into the dining room and sat at the table, looking at the unfinished dinner and the unfolded papers. A strange desolation swept over me. I had won, protected myself, my money, my dignity, but the price was my family, my relationship with my only son. Even if that relationship had turned out to be fake, the loss of it still felt like a wound. I began to clear the table, putting the plates away, throwing away the leftovers. The house was quiet, only the ticking of the old clock breaking the silence. I could hear that sound now, the measured, quiet ticking, counting down the seconds of my new life. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. I sorted through my belongings, packed up my most valuable possessions, and met with lawyers to finalize the sale of the house. Austin didn't call or visit, which was for the best. But Penny called the day after we talked. Grandma, what's wrong? Her voice sounded worried. Daddy and Mommy came back yesterday very upset and they won't say why. Your daddy and I had a fight, honey. I tried to speak calmly. It was pretty serious. And I've decided to move in with a friend of mine in Portland. You're moving away? I could hear the panic in her voice. But I don't want you to go. I know, sweetie, but sometimes grown-ups have to make tough decisions. And I'll be here for you. Weekends, vacations, whenever you want. Will Daddy allow it? She asked doubtfully. Yes, he promised, I smiled, remembering his last words. And I think he'll keep that promise. Sunday night, the day before I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of my life with Edmund, of the years when Austin had been a boy, of all the joys and sorrows these walls had seen. The bedroom was where I lingered the longest, looking at the bed that Edmund and I had shared for 35 years. The picture on the bedside table was of him in his favorite sweater, smiling with graying temples and kind eyes. What would you say, Edmund? I whispered, touching the photograph. Am I doing the right thing? Of course, there was no answer, but I knew in my heart that he would approve. Edmund had always told me to be strong, to stand up for myself. No one has the right to decide for you, Vi, he often said. Monday morning, the cab arrived at 9 sharp. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of photos and memorabilia, and a bag of papers were all I'd taken with me from the house where I'd lived most of my life. I didn't expect to see Austin and Helena, but when I stepped out onto the porch, their car was parked at the curb. They got out and hesitantly approached. We came to say goodbye, Austin said. He looked gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. And to apologize, Helena added, looking down at the ground. What we planned was wrong. We're sorry. I looked at them, feeling a strange mix of emotions, anger, hurt, disappointment, but also a tiny spark of compassion. They looked pathetic, broken. I accept your apology, I finally said, but it doesn't change my mind. We understand, Austin nodded. And we just wanted to see you one last time. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then I opened my bag and pulled out an envelope. This is for Penny, I held it out to Austin. A letter from me and a bus ticket to Portland. It's valid all summer. Let her decide when she wanted to come. Austin took the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. Thanks, Mom. I'll make sure she gets it. I know, I smiled weakly. Despite everything, you're a good father, Austin. Don't ruin this relationship with your greed, too. He flinched but nodded, accepting my words. The cab pulled up and the driver began loading my things. I took one last look at my house, at my son and his wife standing on the porch with slumped shoulders. Goodbye, I said and got into the car without looking back. The drive to Portland took 3 hours. I stared out the window at the passing scenery and thought about the strange way my life had turned out. 4 months ago, I was a deaf widow resigned to my fate. Now I was on my way to a new city, to a new life, leaving behind not only a home, but a son who was not the man I thought he was. Evelyn met me at the train station, her face radiant with joy. Vi! She hugged me. Welcome to your new life. Thank you, Evie. I smiled, feeling the heaviness of the last few weeks begin to recede. I was ready for her. Evelyn's house turned out to be a cozy 2-story cottage in a quiet neighborhood, with a large garden and a veranda where you could sit in the evenings watching the sunset. My room was bright and spacious, overlooking the garden. Do you like it? Evelyn asked when we finished unpacking my things. Very much. I looked around the room, which was beginning to feel like mine. It's the perfect place for a fresh start. That evening, we sat on the veranda with glasses of wine, watching the sun sink below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. You know, Vi, Evelyn said thoughtfully, sometimes loss opens doors to new possibilities. You lost your hearing, and that led you to an experimental treatment. You lost trust in your son, and that led you here to a new life. Philosophical today? I smiled. I just think that at 67, it's not too late to start over. She raised her glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings. I touched my glass to hers, and the clinking of crystals sounded like music in the evening air. A month later, Penny arrived. her eyes shining with the excitement of new discoveries. We showed her around Portland, took her to museums and parks, made elaborate desserts together from Evelyn's recipes. She talked about home, about school, about how Austin and Helena had gotten quieter, more thoughtful since I'd left. "Daddy often looks at your old pictures," she said one evening as we sat in the garden. "I think he misses you, Grandma." "Perhaps," I stroked her head. "But sometimes people need time and distance to realize their mistakes. Will you ever get back together?" she asked hopefully. "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly. "Some bridges are hard to rebuild once they've been burned. But I will always love you, and you will always be welcome in my home." "In your and Evelyn's home," she corrected, smiling. "Yes, in my and Evelyn's house," I laughed. Life went on. I started volunteering at the local library, helping with the bookkeeping. Evelyn and I joined the garden club and spent hours tending to the plants in our garden. We went to concerts and the theater, a luxury I couldn't afford when I was deaf. I heard music, voices, laughter, the sound of rain on the roof. Every sound was a gift I never took for granted again. Austin called occasionally, short, awkward conversations, mostly about Penny. I answered politely, but with restraint. The wound caused by his betrayal was still too fresh to pretend it hadn't happened. One day, almost a year after I moved away, I received a letter from him, a real paper letter, handwritten. He wrote about his remorse, about how ashamed he was of his actions, about how losing our connection had made him reevaluate his priorities. He wrote that he had started therapy to deal with his greed and selfishness, that he and Helena are working through their financial problems in honest ways, that he wasn't asking for forgiveness because he knows he doesn't deserve it, but wanted me to know he was changing. I sat with that letter for a long time, not knowing what to feel. The anger was still there, but something else was there too. A tiny germ of hope that maybe someday we could build a new relationship. Not like before, that trust had been irrevocably broken, but maybe something new.